And when I'm talking to someone, one of the things I say is, this is how you feel. I'm going to let you have it and stay there now, but we're not going to stay there forever.
Mm, mm.
Like, we have to allow us to be in the space of whatever it is. However, I'm not going to let you stay here because it's not going to be healthy. It's not going to serve you to move forward.
Hello, you've reached the Balance to Excellence show with Dr. Judy Wright. I am Dr. Judy Wright, and I am a wellness and performance strategist. And today on the Balance to Excellence show, we're diving deep into mental health and stress management and self-care with expert Natolie Warren. Natalie is a sought-after psychotherapist, a mental health expert, and a corporate trainer who has spent over a decade helping people decrease stress and anxiety, improve mental clarity, and cultivate balance in their personal and professional lives. She's worked with thousands of leaders, of corporations, of school systems, of organizations, guiding them through balance and self-care and overall well-being. And her mission is to help individuals feel more authentic and present and fulfilled without feeling stressed out, overwhelmed, and burned out. Natalie, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, Judy, thank you for having me. I am amazing. Yes.
Yes. Now, when we came on, you were telling me that you had just finished a breathwork session.
Yes. So I'm still in the zen of all of the goodness of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot, later in the episode, as I often do, I walk people through. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, have you walk us through just a slight bit of what you do.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Now, before I go on, because we're going to get deep into it, for all those here, thank you so much. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Bring in somebody that you think can benefit from this as well. So, Natalie, what led you on? Tell us a bit about your journey.
Mm.
And what led you to become a psychotherapist and ultimately led you to where you are now.
Yes, wow. It has been a journey, Judy, so I will say that. But I was that kid. So this started for me very young. I was that kid that my friends came to, they shared with me challenges. They wanted me to help them figure out things. Now, I didn't have a lot of insight and awareness. Clearly, I was probably 13, 14, but something about who I was as a person would draw people to me. And I followed that knowing I was going to do something with helping people. And I remember I was deciding between honestly nursing and psychology. And my high school psychology teacher, I felt like, "Oh, maybe I should lean this way more because I didn't really want to wear uniforms, to tell the truth. That's going to be boring wearing the same uniform every day. I don't want to do that." And so I pursued that undergrad, then went further with a master's degree and actually have two of them now. But I knew that I wanted to figure out why people did what they did. And I was drawn to shows. At the time, it was Oprah. Every week, there would be certain people she'd have on her shows. And I would run home after school to get on the couch to make sure I watched some of my favorite mentors from afar.
Mhm.
So personal development and growth and healing have just been a part of who I've been all my life.
That's wonderful. And so I always say it's so funny the little things in our childhood that could lead us to something. A lot of people saw something in you. They saw that light and they saw I believe they saw that sense of zen and peace in you that I can go talk to her. She doesn't look judgmental. You're like, I was 13, I didn't know.
Mhm.
I didn't have any answers.
Right, right. And whatever I said, it must have helped, but I didn't know what I was doing.
But you know how sometimes they say sometimes all it takes is for us to listen. Like
Right,
that's the help that people need,
right,
right?
right,
And so they clearly saw something in you, that let them you be that air, and that yes, what do you think?
right, 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 right. Or sometimes it was just to allow them to come up with their own answers because I
Yeah.
believe people have the ability to do that when they have someone that holds space for them to do that.
Yes, absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. So now what led you to go that extra distance? A lot of people, they're psychotherapists, and they may open up their own practice. They're psychotherapists in their space, and that's it. What made you go that extra distance where you're like opening out?
Mhm.
to, working with all these different groups? And what's the driving force behind it?
Yes, great question. I knew when I started the practice, so I have been blessed to have a knowing about things. So I knew I was going to go in private practice. I knew that I was going to be working with women at some point, even though I had my own wounds, and maybe we'll come up and talk about some of those later. But I knew that the four walls of my practice could not contain what I wanted to
Mm,
share with the world. Like I knew
mm,
that. And so, wow, it was 10 years ago, a friend of mine had a conversation. She and I were talking about our goals and our dreams, and we had been doing it for years. And she said, Natalie, and she gave me an idea to start expanding outside of the four walls. And that's where I started doing live events and retreats. So, but I knew from the beginning the four walls weren't going to be able to contain what I wanted to share with the world. And I've just been fortunate and blessed to be able to do so many other things outside of my private practice.
Well, if you weren't going to allow yourself to be contained by a uniform, we knew you weren't going to allow. You're like, I'm not doing that uniform. So you
Good
weren't.
point.
You weren't going to allow yourself to be contained by four walls. And I looked at some of your things and the testimonials, and you're out here blessing people. You're out
What a
here blessing
blessing.
people.
What a blessing.
Yeah. So let's jump right in,
Hmm.
right? Because I was having this conversation, Natalie, with my husband yesterday, and I said we often talk about people and their mental health, right? And there's a lot. Now, I'm going to try not to be too political. There's a lot that's going on in the world right now
You can say it loud.
and going on in our country right now. And I said to my husband just yesterday, we definitely, because everybody's an individual and they go through their own thing, and we definitely need to be making sure that space is being held for everybody as an individual. But there comes a point where we need to talk about the mental health
Right.
of the society that is surrounding us, like
Right.
just as a whole, because it feels heavy out here,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And that's going to tell on us as an entire nation,
Right.
right? And so there's that collective mental health
Right.
that we need to start talking about. There's a lot of people who are feeling overwhelmed. Lots of
Hmm.
information happening, lots of anxiety, lots of, depression,
Hmm.
stress, a lot of
Yes.
stress. People in their regular daily lives, but then just the stress of everything that's going on around them. In your work with, say with these organizations and these professionals, and even in your one-to-one, what are some common patterns that you're seeing?
I think you've named a good bit of them. Lots of overwhelm, lots of stress. And we experience stress so differently, which I think is also a part of why we have to have conversations about it. Primarily, stress is experienced in the body. But
Mhm.
sometimes we don't recognize it because we've been taught to be disconnected from our bodies, right? We've been conditioned to not feel. And so I see a lot of that. A lot of people are afraid. Uncertainty, what we're experiencing now, creates fear, and it's appropriate. The fear of the unknown, the fear of what will happen next, the fear of will I make it, the fear of will I be sick, like all of those big fears come up for us. And so a lot of fear is going on, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are shutting down, emotionally shutting down, withdrawing, shutting down, socially shutting down, because it has felt like it's too much.
Yeah, yeah. How do we hold so I'm one of those people, I always say stress is an inevitable event.
Hmm.
But I tell people stress is not normal because I don't want them you're not to normalize stress. But at the same time, how do you hold space for you are valid in what you're feeling? So like how do you let people know that they're valid, and how do you walk them from that space for where they're, as you said, they're shutting down? How do
Hmm.
you walk them from that space to them being shut down, to understanding that they're being shut down, to walking them out of being shut down, because that has its own detriment as well,
Right.
right?
Right, right. We become numb and disconnected. So one of the things you said very nicely is we validate that this is how you're feeling.
Mm,
And when I'm talking to someone, one of the things I say is, "This is how you feel. I'm gonna let you have it and stay there now, but we're not gonna stay there forever."
mm,
Right?
mm.
Like we have to allow us to be in the space of whatever it is.
Yeah.
However, I'm not going to let you stay there because it's not going to be healthy. It's not going to serve you to move forward. And so that acknowledgement and really understanding you can have an and, meaning you can be stressed and we can move forward, or and we can learn a new way of living, or and so instead of it feeling like it has to be either or, which is what happens when we're in a place of stress and overwhelm, everything feels like either or. We lean more
Yes.
into an and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because as you were talking, right? And I can totally, and it's happened to me as well. I can totally see somebody say, "So you wanted me to become more aware of
Mhm.
it. I've been trying to stuff my feelings down.
Mhm.
You want me to become aware only to tell me, but I'm not gonna let you stay there." And,
Mhm.
and they're like, "I was good here though. Why did you
Mhm.
pull me out of it just to tell me, but you can't stay here?"
Mhm.
Right? And
Mhm.
so, letting them know, but it's okay to feel it, and then it's okay to learn how to deal with that feeling, right? Because stuffing it down is its own thing,
Right.
right? And you deal with all types, all different industries, correct? When
Mhm.
you're doing corporate training?
Correct, correct. I am able to obviously do individual, I do group work, I do retreats, but I also am in the corporate space helping. And a lot of corporations and organizations are experiencing the challenges that are coming from our administration down. And the people are feeling this uncertainty, feeling um, a lot of potential emotions around change, right? Because we
Yeah.
don't handle that well. Change is difficult. Most of the change we make in our lives is by force. If we really look back over
Yes.
our lives, we didn't choose it. And that can
Yes.
be very, very challenging in these times.
Well, the realization that you staying in one place doesn't necessarily mean something's not going to change, right?
Right,
So even
right,
just that realization,
right,
because the world is ever changing around us, right?
right,
So
right.
just that realization, and when you're fighting it
Mhm.
and it's changing anyway, you can get so upset about that. Like you're
Right.
like, I liked it the way it was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all can be guilty. Yeah, but I love the quote that says the only constant in life is change.
It's change.
Yeah.
It's change. That's absolutely true. So, um, as a medical professional, one of the things that I know is because I used to see patients all the time. We'll push through pain and we'll ignore pain, and you mentioned that how we just kind of try not to feel,
Mhm.
right? Even physically, we try to ignore things and become quite successful at ignoring things, right? And as I often tell people, or I used to tell my patients, or that pain is trying to tell you something.
Right, right,
And don't ignore it to a point where now we're in a serious situation when you could have come in, when you felt the pain the second time. The
right.
first time, okay, a lot of us say, what was that? And we move on. But that second time, you might want to call somebody and make an appointment, get that checked out. And and a lot of high achieving professionals do the same thing with stress.
Mhm.
They
Right,
they 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 push through stress so that they can get the job done,
right.
and whether the job be at the job or whether the job be something at home, they're doing it so they can get the job done.
Right.
Earlier this week, Natalie, I still have it.
Mm.
I'm still nasally, but earlier this week, after my husband, because sometimes it be your own people, came home with an illness last week.
Right.
I started to feel it on Sunday night, but by Monday evening, I was having chills. And I didn't
Mhm.
want to believe I was having chills. But my
Mm.
children looked fine, and I had the heat pumped up to tropical. And I just kept trying to push through until I said, I can't. I can't. I'm freezing, and I just felt fatigued. But I literally was like, what are you doing? You know you're not supposed to try to push through, right?
Mm.
And the plain fact of the matter is, I wasn't working at the level I was supposed to be working anyway because I was trying to push through something I didn't need to be pushing through. So a lot of people, when they're doing it, they don't realize that it's making them less effective. So how do you guide people to shift that thought process? Because I do this work and I had to have a come to Jesus talk with
Right.
myself on Monday evening. So
Right.
how did you, guide people to shift that mindset?
Right. No, I think you said something important. You talked about physical pain, but I thought of emotional pain as well, or emotional experiences. So I want to offer a little insight and then how do I shift? One of the important pieces is I educate people. We have about 400 emotional experiences every day. Like, let's just put that out there. Okay. So when you feel like
Mm.
you're all over the place, you are. You're all over
Mm.
the place. Okay.
Okay.
When people understand that, though, going to the second thing you mentioned is our emotions have messages for us. We miss it. No one taught us. No one went to the class of Emotion 101 to learn about your emotions and the messages, right? So we sometimes miss the messages of our emotions. When you learn for an example, that the feeling of loneliness is only trying to communicate to you that you want connection. That's it. But when we don't know that, we miss the message and we get caught in the emotion, and we try to do one of five things. We try to hold on to the emotion. We try to get rid of the emotion. We try to suppress the emotion. We try to deny the emotion. Those are the things that actually cause us to have pain, which is what you were saying earlier, as it relates to our emotions. So when I educate people to say the emotion of boredom, guess what? It's only trying to tell you you want to do something. That's it. And if we listen to the message, then you're going, oh, I think I want to do something. The emotion of anger is just telling you someone has crossed the boundary. That's it. That's all it is trying to tell you. So that's how I start to help people to get through it, because we first understand what is it trying to tell you and get the message. And when you get the message, the intensity of the emotion, it's almost like a kid. Once they got your attention, the intensity of their behavior will decrease once they realize you're paying attention. So that's how we start that process.
First, let me say that I'm stuck on the emotion of boredom. I don't think my brain ever thought of boredom as an emotion.
It is.
Don't think I ever thought of boredom as an emotion, but it is how you feel. I'm bored.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Eureka, I'm telling you, I tell people I learn something new every day. I
Right.
never thought of it that way. And when I was younger, if you said you were bored, that meant they're gonna find you something to do, right? So you kind of you
Somebody
kind of like learn
understood.
to shut that down. So I can see now that I stuffed down that boredom emotion. Aha. Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Mhm. And with that emotion, since we're talking about boredom, I have to be mindful of it, because if you sit in that emotion and you don't actually do something, it can turn into restlessness.
Mm.
And if you're not mindful, it'll turn into sadness and depression. Right.
Mm.
So I have to monitor that emotion, because I can fall in it. And if I'm not careful, I can see the restlessness coming. I'm like, oh, I'm just restless. And then it could be sadness and depression that comes under that. So just being mindful. I wanted to bring that to your attention because I know that.
Oh, that's really good. And if I think a lot of people don't think of that as an emotion, be, because it was boredom seems problematic to people. And if you just understood that that's an emotion, you might look at it differently.
Right.
Wow. So there's something that you said, and I'm gonna, because like you, I work with people from different industries, but I really specialize
Mhm.
working with medical professionals because that's what I am, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm thinking, because you gave me a number, see, I learned something else new about the 400 emotions, 400
Mhm.
plus emotions that we experience throughout the day. And I'm thinking, and then we make upwards of 20 something, 30,000 decisions a day. That's why people could get decision fatigue. And as a medical professional, I'm going to talk from the aspect of a doctor. We're almost taught to be like this
Mhm.
so that we can make the most critical
Right.
of the decisions, right? Do we, I know you say we tend to miss emotions. Do we, in a way, have some, to a certain extent, have to miss some of the emotions?
Mhm. Mhm. Right, right. So
Okay.
the way it works is the emotions that you remember are the
Mhm.
ones that you attach the meaning to, or
Okay.
you attach the thought to. Otherwise, the rest of them come and go like the wind, right? They come and go as the wind, at the wind, but the ones we add meaning to, so maybe you felt sad and you said, I am sad because my friend didn't call me back, right? Now we've attached a meaning to the emotion,
Mhm.
and now we hold it, or we noticed it. We notice it. So yeah.
But our brain, I'm going to assume, knows that we just went through, no wonder we're tired.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And given what they are, some of them are more draining or unpleasant, would we say. Yeah.
All these decision making and all these emotions, no wonder people are out here tired.
Right, right. Which is why we have to settle the mind. I love teaching that. That's why you have to quiet the mind, because
Yeah.
your mind is running like an app in the back of your phone constantly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Now, in doing that and the quieting the mind and that whole mindfulness piece, right? There's a part where you are taking care of yourself, which is a big piece of that's so important. Like when I tell you it's something I clutch on to because of my own story of not taking care of myself and, you know, uh uh, through the intervention of God,
Right.
talking through a friend who made me promise to go, but she wasn't making me promise to go specifically.
Mhm.
She was making her friend group promise to go to their doctors. And I, as a doctor, was missing mine. That's how I went and found out I had cancer. through that, self-care has become a humongous thing to me. Humongous. I will scream it from the mountaintops to everybody. You gotta take care
Mhm.
of yourself. You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta take care of yourself. Yes, you have the time
Right.
to take care of yourself.
Right.
Okay.
You can't afford not to.
You
Uh,
can't afford not to. And I was at a point when because my treatment and the lockdown for the
mm,
pandemic happened, they were
wow.
like this. Well, when the lockdown happened, I had to call. I had one of those packages, monthly massage packages, and I had to
Mhm.
call them to lock it down to say, and I said, "How many do I have?" And it was something like 27, Natalie. I was like, "That's over 2 years. What have
Right.
I been doing?"
Right. Wow.
Right? So, how do you talk to people about self-care? Because a lot of people agree that they should do self-care, but they don't. And sometimes it's not just a matter of time,
Right.
right? We're trying to change the thought process around self-care. How do you talk to people, if you talk to people
Right.
about self-care? How do you talk to people about self-care?
It's a great conversation. And you're right. So many of us, and I specifically work with women, but men have their own challenges, don't value enough the importance of self care. And some of the reasons, obviously, we'll say we don't have time. But I've learned we create time for what we find important. Secondly, though, there's a lot of guilt, right? This idea of guilt. And we live in a society that conditions us to think that we should be doing, right? We should be doing more. And so the guilt comes in with women thinking, I'm not doing enough. So if I do self care, that takes me away from doing something in our minds. And that underlying belief, which is really where I kind of hone in on, when we feel like we're not doing enough, it really leads into this belief that I am not enough.
Mm.
So we internalize, I'm not doing enough, to that I am not enough. And guess what? That leaves us in this place of proving. So now I got to do more to prove what? That I'm enough, right? So it
Mhm.
becomes this cycle, which interferes, in my opinion, to women being able to do self care because I need to be doing something. And when I am not doing anything, there is a label. I'm lazy, I'm unproductive, whatever word you fill in. And it leads into this belief that I'm not enough. So that's a big piece of it, is really shattering that belief system of doing, 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 and accepting that we are already enough, always have been. It's not something we earn. It's not something we do. We have to accomplish. It is the truth of who you are. And so helping women to connect to the truth is the way that I usually approach it. But here's the other thing. Sometimes we're doing self-care because some women will say, well, I'm doing self-care, right? I'm taking care of myself. And then we consider a lot of that like pampering, where we're going to get our nails done, a massage, we're getting the hair done. Those are forms of self-care, and they're not all bad. However, if you're not rested, you can pamper all year and still struggle.
If you don't preach. If you don't no, so I co-authored a book called Self-Care is Not a Mani-Pedi because
Right.
I was like, and I tell people, you get a manicure or pedicure. I love that for you. If that's your form of self-care, but it's not the only form of self-care. And if it doesn't deep down renew you,
Right.
is it really self-care? And are you really doing it for yourself
Right.
or for how it looks out to the rest of the world? Oh, it looks like she takes care of herself or he takes care of himself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're not rested, it won't even it'll just hit the surface. It's almost like eating. You know how you eat and you feel good and then it wears off? That's what it
Mm-hmm.
becomes, right? That's what it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm ready for the next. So many of us, the other piece of that though is sometimes we don't assess our current level of stress. So if you're not assessing your current level of stress and you're not assessing your current level of self-care, your self-care has to exceed the level of stress that you're dealing with. And that becomes the problem because people are not recognizing their level of stress is not sufficient, or their self care is not sufficient for the level of stress they're dealing with. And if you're not exceeding it, it doesn't do anything to help you feel renewed. So that becomes the other challenge that I've seen.
Something that you just said made me back up again because we're going to go back to boredom. And it was the important topic of how we see ourselves if we're not productive. And and it brought me back to my childhood again because it's like that saying, idle hands are the devil's work, which is
Right.
part of the reason it's the devil's playground, right? So it's
Right.
part of the reason why if you even uttered the word bored,
Hmm.
oh, you don't have enough to do. You're out
Right.
here being idle, right?
Right. Right.
And now I'm gonna find you something to do. And
Hmm.
so as you were talking, I was like, yeah. And then that's ingrained in you. I
Right.
gotta find something to do.
Right.
And that took, if I took off, other than taking vacation, if I took off more than a day for illness of work, I felt wrong for it. And I would say my going on medical leave to get treated was probably the least. I was like, nope, gotta take care of myself, right?
Wow.
Because I realized that I had missed mammograms for
Mm.
a couple of years, and that was the first time I was like, mm-mm.
Wow.
But other than that, I'd have a cold,
Mm.
I'd have bronchitis,
Wow.
you know? And I'm like, look, I work remote. I'll just work through the bronchitis. Like, you know what I mean? And so just the stuff that we learn, which is of course maybe part of culture, part of society, but we really do amp up and laud and glorify this need to keep busy. And so just listening to what you're saying and realizing how the emotion, wait till I tell my husband, the emotion of boredom
Mhm.
and
Mm.
how all of that ties in to
Right.
what we do. But the other piece that you said, what I call the awareness piece, and people just because we're not aware, just taking the time to be aware of how you're feeling in the moment
Right.
is really important to even knowing what to do next.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And some people struggle with knowing how they're feeling. So I do want to speak to that.
Hmm.
I don't expect you to know
Yeah.
because we've been conditioned for so long. However, there are tools that can help you. And one of my favorites is a feeling wheel. So they have them all over the place. And what it does is it helps you to hone in on how am I really feeling? And you may say, I'm feeling sad. But as we look at the wheel, we may discover that you're feeling abandoned. You're
Mhm.
feeling rejected, right? You're feeling alone. Some words that we may not verbalize initially. So if you don't know, that's okay too. There's some things that could help you.
Oh my goodness, all kinds of adjectives. Okay, and but the feeling wheel is really good.
Mhm.
It's really good because for myself and for people I've worked with, it really comes down to I feel sad, I feel upset, I feel good. All right,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
I feel happy even on this eternal. What is happiness? You
Right.
know, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel angry. I feel tired.
Absolutely.
And we find ourselves saying that a lot because we don't know what to say outside of I feel tired.
I feel tired. Yeah. And stress is another one. We'll just say I feel stressed, but it
I
could
feel
be
stressed.
something else that we just can't articulate.
But you want to know something?
Mhm.
It's the weirdest thing. That's the one I hear the least. I don't hear people say I feel stressed. They will tag
Wow.
it onto a lot of other things. And this is where I talk to people about how we just normalize stress as it's just part of being, right?
Wow.
Or it's just okay. I mean, I work, of course, I'm supposed to be stressed. If I'm doing
Mhm.
well, I'm supposed to be stressed.
Right. Right.
So it's funny. I used to hear people say it a lot, but I feel like I hear it less.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. I definitely hear tired. I am tired. I
Yeah.
am tired. Yeah.
Do you think that there's something, do people feel bad about saying so? I don't know.
I'm not sure how we are internalizing it. I think that you're right that we have accepted it, tolerated chronic stress
Mhm.
as you're speaking to it, more chronic stress. And some of us have become addicted to that, right? This feeling of the pressure of getting it. Like we even tell ourselves, I work better under pressure, right? You know, those things that we
Mhm.
share and say to
Mm.
ourselves, which is not true. I mean, your nervous system should not be activated all day long.
All the time.
That is not that is not how we were intended to live. So yes, I do think that that could be a part of why people don't speak to it. But then I also wonder if saying that I'm stressed makes you appear weak, right? And it makes you appear weak. Tired, we can say we're tired because I didn't get enough sleep or I've been running around.
Because I
But
was
maybe
doing a lot. See how
yes,
busy I am?
yes,
I'm productive.
yes, yes. Exactly. 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 That conditioning.
Oh my goodness. So let's talk about, because in all of this, there's something that's so important. And I would like you to talk about how you do it for yourself. Like, how do you set those guardrails? How do
Mm,
you set those boundaries for
mm.
yourself?
Right. Yes, yes. As far as self-care, is that the
As far as prioritizing your well-being and making sure that you're taken care of so that you're not taking on chronic stress.
Mhm. Good question. I do daily weekly adjustments. So I will say I haven't mastered it. Let's just start there, right? Because some
Mhm.
people feel like once I obtain it, I'm good.
You good?
No, no, that's not how this works. So I make daily and weekly adjustments on it. I listen to my body. This body has infinite wisdom. So if I can't think it and realize that I'm overwhelmed and stressed, my body will tell me if
Mm,
I listen, right? Meaning I can notice my heart rate is more elevated. I can notice that uneasy feeling in my stomach. I can notice my neck and my shoulders. 80% of us carry stress and anxiety in our necks and our shoulders. And so if I'm sitting long enough and I'm going, my neck is stiff. Oh my goodness. My body will tell me what my mind isn't ready to process. And so that's how I do it for me. I do these internal checks with myself. I notice the moments, Judy, when I'm more agitated and easily bothered. So there are some days my kids can do the worst of the worst. And I'm like, oh dear, it's okay. We're going to figure it out. We're going to work it out. And then there are the days when they can do the tiniest things. And I'm like, that to
yeah.
me is my signal, right? That's me. I need to make an adjustment. And so in those moments, I pull away. During the pandemic, it was extremely difficult in my field to serve all the people that needed help. And I was overextending myself because I just have a heart, right? I wanted us all to be better. However, what I had to do was I had to shut down. I had to have a day where I shut down, like literally at 6 o'clock, 6:30, I was in the bed. Literally, that is not me. If you know me in any way, you know that I don't do any of that. But I had to. My husband would take over Friday night, whatever we were going to eat or cleaning the kitchen or whatever it was. But that was a boundary. I had to
Yeah.
find and create space for me to recharge. So those are some of the things that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that the people you work with, especially when we're talking in the professional spaces, do you find that they're struggling with boundaries?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For various reasons. Boundaries can be scary.
Yeah.
Many of
Yeah,
us
it can
struggle.
be.
Many of us struggle with the idea of if I set this boundary, I won't be liked or loved.
Mm,
Our number one
mm,
fear as humans, our number one fear is that we won't be loved. So
mm.
most of the stuff that we do consciously or unconsciously is to prevent that from happening, which could be setting a boundary.
Yeah.
Sometimes we haven't seen boundaries modeled, right? In our families, people might barge into your room without knocking. That's a boundary.
Yeah.
Going through
No,
your stuff, all right?
that's
That's
true.
a boundary. So sometimes we didn't see boundary setting appropriately done, and that makes it hard for us. And so those would be the top two: the fears of what could happen, or just not knowing how to properly set boundaries.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, in some cases when I realize people don't have boundaries, and I'm just like, at first I was like, what? But it's really easy, even when you have them, to allow them to slip if you don't pay attention. So is I can ask some people, do you have boundaries? And they'll say, yeah. And then
Mhm.
they may even tell you a few. And so how do you maintain them? How good at you doing that? Because I know I
Mhm.
made mine slip.
Right.
And I was sliding right toward that cliff of burnout because I made mine slip. And so I'm very cognizant. And it's not even about being so stringent all the time,
Right.
right? Because again, we're fluid, we're dynamic people, and
Right.
different situations call for different things. But to make sure that for the most part, if this is part of your value system, to protect yourself, and I think that's part of it. People see it as negative to,
Right.
and I'm like, it's not negative. You're just protecting yourself and
Right.
protecting your goals. Like you should have goals too. You have values too. But for the most part, your boundaries should be something that you can hold in place most of the time with certain caveats,
Right.
right? And so I always tell people if you don't have any, better go get you some, like
Mhm.
today. Like, just at least sit down and start to think what's important to me that is important enough for me to say this is a no-go. And like you
Right.
said, it could be that you can't come in my room without knocking. I go to bed at 10 o'clock. That means that the phone's gonna have to be off. The phone, this and
Right.
that. And we could tell ourselves all kinds of stuff because I know I did. But what if somebody's calling? You know what I didn't realize? If somebody keeps calling you, it breaks through your thing anyway.
I didn't know.
Right? So I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that," because for the longest time, I wouldn't turn my phone. I don't what if my parents something happened with one of my parents, or whatever, but I heard when somebody told me that, I was like, "I didn't know that." "Oh, okay,
Interesting.
great." Then there should be no reason that I can't turn off the thing, put it in sleep mode, because if it's an emergency, call back. It'll
Right.
break.
Wow. Wow.
But we make a lot of excuses for why we shouldn't have boundaries or, there's always a reason not to
Mm.
have a boundary. And the one thing I try to tell people, because I think there's some fear of missing out too, and like you said, not being liked, is when you have no boundaries, it doesn't let you be liked more.
Right.
People are apt to disrespect you because you have no boundaries
Right.
whatsoever. And so if you've encountered somebody that didn't have any boundaries, maybe in your group work or your one-to-one, how do you walk them through that?
Well, good question. Good question. And not that they hadn't had any, but I would say they haven't had it in the places they wanted most. I think one of the ways to talk through that is to talk about how it feels when you feel like a person does X, Y, and Z as it relates to what you consider a boundary crossing.
Mhm.
So, what does that feel like? What was that like for you? And one of the things I've found is sometimes people who are people pleasers have trouble with setting boundaries because
Okay.
they are concerned about how they will be viewed or judged, right? And so, even with them, helping them to see, one of the things I say to them is that, did you realize being a people pleaser is actually a manipulator? They don't think of it that way. I know, right? Because what you're trying to ultimately do is
You got me folding my arms again.
what you're trying to do is manipulate how someone else will feel or how they'll respond. That's ultimately what you're doing, right? We're not consciously telling ourselves that. So when they have trouble with boundary setting, we have conversations on how does it feel to be a manipulator? And then that doesn't sit well, right? Because we're like, oh, I don't want to be that person either.
Because that takes you from being the martyr or the giver
Mm.
to
Yeah. But that's essentially what you're trying to do, right? By people pleasing, you're trying to manipulate their outcome, their feeling, their decision. And that usually shifts with the boundary setting and people pleasing, right? Because then it's, I don't want to be that person either. How can I make the change? And so just helping people to see that is helpful. You're thinking about it. What's on your mind?
so you feel like you're out here sacrificing being the people pleaser, but in all actuality, you're not the saint that you think you are.
It shifts that mindset. Yeah,
Wow. That's deep. That's deep.
it's true.
I know this is gonna be whirling it around in my mind for the rest of the day. And no, I'm not a people pleaser. That's not
Mhm.
me, but I mean that wow. That's deep.
Yeah. Sometimes that truth is enough to shift the behavior, which then allows them to what? Create the boundaries.
Create the boundary.
Yeah.
Create the boundary. Wow. Okay. All right. So just let's go into the workplace, right? Because I've worked corporate, I still work corporate, but I've worked corporate as a medical person. And sometimes,
Mhm.
right, places say they have well-being programs, and they have programs. They do have programs. But it's a lot of reading work or getting on these online things, you know. So in the work that you do, like, what are some of the key ways you move to surface level? Like I know you do breath work, and
Mhm.
I know I've pulled that into places which I didn't know how they would receive it,
Mhm.
but shockingly enough, people are like, "I feel at peace."
Right.
Right?
Right.
And it literally was 2 minutes. Like, right? And they're like, "Oh, what kind of things do you do to get people to move? Because we're talking about actual culture shifting
Right.
to a culture of well-being and not just the on paper. See, we have a program,
Right.
right? Like, so what are some of the things you do to get an organization to move beyond that surface level?
Right, right. No, great question, great question. And I've been fortunate to partner with organizations that are really in the movement of wellness and true well-being. But I think it's the education around it. Sometimes it's just understanding about emotional wellness and mental wellness. And so even as we've been talking, just educating them on the 400 emotional experiences, right? To understand this is what's happening. This is why we need this type of wellness in your space. Or we have 65,000 thoughts every day. Of the 65,000 thoughts you have every day, 75% of those thoughts are negative, right? Just plain
Mm,
old negative.
mm,
90% of those thoughts are thoughts that you thought yesterday. So guess what? You're recycling old negative thoughts every day
mm.
over and over and over again. So sometimes it's just the awareness of that, the awareness
Yeah.
that we all have mental health. Let's not make it a they thing. It's a we thing. We all have it. And if we're not careful to manage it, then it creates disorder and disease. So some of it's at high level education. I love doing meditation and breath work in the corporate space because, like you said, it doesn't take long to get the parasympathetic nervous system back online, right? You
Yep.
just got to access it. And meditation and breathing is such a great way to put the remote control in your hand and turn the system on. So being able to do that has been so helpful. But a lot of the organizations that I partner with are already in that movement of well-being in the workplace.
That's wonderful. And I knew that there are more and more that have come on, but sometimes it is people are saying, well, we have a wellness program. Well, let me ask you something. How are you doing with the turnover? And this
Right,
is very, very important from the medical professional standpoint because we have more and more people. I tell people all the time, there's not a shortage of nurses.
right,
There's not a shortage of physicians. There's a shortage of them working in these spaces because they're stepping out of them now.
right. They're tired and burnt out. Yeah.
They are tired and burnt out, right? So what's your turnover looking like? Because
Correct.
perhaps I'm not saying you don't have one. And kudos to everybody that does. Kudos to everybody that does. It's very important though not to just check off a box, right? And I say that to people too. When you're trying to take care of yourself, it's very important to not just check off a box. Really
Mm,
hone in on what it is you're feeling. And like you said, we don't always know what we're feeling. Maybe we can't define it, but we often can, if we take the time to be aware, can know we're feeling something, even if we can't define what it is. That pain, right?
yeah.
That pain. So, all right, Natalie, we are getting close to the end, and this has been enlightening,
Mm.
right? I mean, I am blessed that I'm not taking notes because I could go back and listen, right? I'm kid you not, I'm gonna say, let me tell you what I learned to my husband. I'm probably gonna call my best friend too and say, "Girl, let me tell you what I learned today." But so I'm gonna ask you a few questions right at the end, and also ask you if you could just show us a breathwork exercise because a lot of people don't realize it's more than just taking a deep breath,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so, if you don't mind, we can do that. But all right, to everybody that is still here,
Mhm.
thank you so much for being here. We enjoy having you here. Okay. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe, share, and even comment. We love to hear your comments and reach back out to you. But if you haven't done that yet, what are you waiting for? Get in here and comment. Sometimes it's you and subscribe. Sometimes you think you did and you didn't. So subscribe, like, so we can keep bringing you more of these episodes and bring somebody.
Yeah.
Bring somebody that you know can benefit from the conversation, from hearing the conversation today. All right, Natalie. Okay. So, what is something that you've learned on your own journey that you know now that you wish you had known earlier?
I've learned on my journey. One of the things that popped into my head immediately is that I am enough. So I didn't get a chance to share the story, but I had some
Mhm.
wounds from a kid from being teased second to sixth grade for
Mm,
different reasons from different kids. And it left this womb of not feeling enough, not being enough. I wish I would have known that earlier, but had I not gone through the journey, I don't know if I would have been able to take that with me to help others. So I don't want to change the experience, but I certainly know that I would have wanted to know that earlier.
Again, the things that we can pick up in childhood,
Mm,
and if we can learn something from them, they're so good. Or even as someone's teaching you something, you can equate it and say, "Is that why?"
right.
And that's so good. And I agree with you. There's certain things that I'm like, at the time I went through it, I'm like, I wish I didn't go through that. And
Mm,
then I realize now that it makes me who I am today. And it makes me able to help other people with it as well. So, absolutely. And so, the next question I have for you is if someone listening right now is feeling completely overwhelmed, where would you say they should start?
I think that's a great question. And I know this speaks to so many. I would say the first place to start is with the pause. I know that that seems counterproductive or may
That's
feel counterproductive if you're feeling overwhelmed, but pause. And that looks like in the second, if that's all you have, to take a breath and pause. If it looks
Mhm.
like creating time in the day, if it looks like being able to get away or do something that you enjoy, but invite in a pause. What that does is it creates space. Creating space could allow you a moment to think, but it also can allow you a moment to breathe. So that would be the first place to start with the pause.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. It's something I talk about all the time. And I would piggyback on that and say, please don't think you cannot. Please don't think it's impossible. And please know that if you don't take your pause, if you don't stop for a moment, okay, it'll build and build, and then you will be stopped whether you like it or not. It's just a matter of how.
You get to choose.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, let's define excellence Natalie style.
Mm.
How do you personally define excellence in your life?
Great question. For me, excellence is when I am showing up in my authentic self, right? Connected to the truth of who I am, what I believe, my purpose, my vision. I am giving in a way that's supportive to me, right? So I'm not giving from my cup, I'm giving from overflow. And that I am not just aware of the gifts that I was given, but I am sharing them because I know that that means that I am fulfilling the why I came on this earth. So for me, that is excellence, doing what I love and what I was born to do, and being around people that I know I love and care for.
Absolutely. Love that. Love that. Now, could you possibly do a 1 minute breathwork exercise with us?
Sure, I'd love to
Show
hold
us
space.
something.
Yes,
Yes.
I'd love to hold space to breathe. So if it feels supportive, you can leave your eyes open or closed, and we're going to do breath watching. So it's a simple task. We're just going to find and locate the breath. So consciously being aware of the breath without changing the breath. I invite you to see if you can find the breath in the body. Maybe it's in your chest, in your diaphragm, in your throat, noticing the breath without changing the breath, and allow the breath to be an anchor, a steady force, a constant rhythm, noticing that breath. And notice if it's shallow or is it deep. Noticing if it's fast or if it's slow. Noticing the rise and fall of the chest as you're breathing naturally. Inviting you to notice the breath as it comes through the nose. What does it feel like? Is it warm? Is it cold? Noticing that breath. Even the nostrils may be moving, the hairs may be moving in your nostrils. Notice it. And tracing that breath as it goes down into the body. Where does it go next? As it lands in the chest and the abdomen. And notice what it feels like when it leaves the body. Connecting with that breath as a reminder of life, of stability, of consistency. Inviting you to take a breath in as we close the practice of watching the breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, opening your eyes, adjusting when you're ready. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank guys. Look, it is that powerful. To do, and it doesn't take long at all to do that and bring yourself to a place of peace and calm. And even when you think you're at peace, your mind is racing. You can do this for a minute or two to bring yourself back to peace and calm and to a reset so that if there's things that you need to do, you can now do it with more clarity. And so thank you for that, Natalie. I really appreciate your willingness to do that with the audience. Now, Natalie, how can people connect with you?
Yes, I'd love to stay connected. And thank you, Judy, for having me. I appreciate you. I'm on all social media platforms as Natolie Warren. I tell the story my mother and father knew I would be unique. So my name has an O in it. So make sure you find that. And then the website for me is www.nataliewarren.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure speaking to a colleague. We're colleagues in what we do. Right. And so it's been a pleasure to have you on today and speak to someone that is so like-minded. All right, everybody. I hope you picked up as many nuggets as I picked up. Even as I do this work, I am always open-minded to pick up more nuggets, and I hope you were able to do so too. Thank you so much for being on listening to the Balance to Excellence show, and we will see you again next episode. Bye.